What's on for the opening?
Say like B word. Good evening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Shake, Rattle, and Roll.
That intro shot was a slot car of Trent's, and want to lead right in to start talking about that little sweetheart?
Yeah, that little sweetheart is a USAC midget. It's a scratch-built car. It's something we've been working on for a little bit of time here. I've got two more that I'm working on. I did not build a chassis on that one. I have two others that I have been working on, and I wanted to see how the body was mounted, and really am into the more unusual types of slot cars. I mean, the run-of-the-mill, take them out of the box and put them on the track are fun, but
And that particular one's a 1/32nd?
130. Well, actually, it'll run on a 1/32nd scale track. It is actually a USAC midget, and dimensionally, truthfully, it's a 1/24 scale car, but it's designed to run on a home track.
Okay.
It's narrow enough so that it'll run on a 1/32nd scale
Okay.
track.
And you built that yourself?
That one actually I purchased. There's no place out there that'll give you the dimensions for the roll cage and whatnot, and I'm using what they call a Sprints Plus chassis for the ones that I'm building, and I wanted to see how they put this one together, and it was a deal on eBay. It was $35. It was $38 by the time it got delivered. And
So when you say you wanted to see how they put it together, you were kind of reverse engineering?
exactly.
Or better known as maybe plagiarizing or stealing?
No, because mine is
Intellectual property? No, I'm just teasing.
There aren't a good set of plans out there, and there's a set of rules for that particular class, but there's really no dimensions. And I was more curious as to how they mounted the body than anything else, because there were a couple of different ways to do it, and that body is actually in three pieces. The driver, the front section, the rear section, all were a one-piece Lexan unit that you can mount on the car, and it'll look fine. But in sections like that and put together, it's a more realistic-looking model.
Very cool. Very cool.
A lot of interesting things happening this week.
Yeah, it's actually a lot of kind of racing news almost happening, even though it's the down season, the doldrums of the year. They're already down at Daytona working out for the 24-hour and for the
watching
new NASCAR spec
watching the
series.
NASCAR, and
They had a little incident today, huh?
I didn't see that part. I was watching NASCAR yesterday, and was too busy getting ready for the show and messing around with some other stuff around the house to spend any time. But I figured the thing's going to be repeated. If you look on the Speed channel, it's on all night. So I figure I could go home tonight, kick back, and
the
turn it on. There's nothing else.
Speed channel has become NASCAR, and a little more NASCAR, and some drag racing and some custom NASCAR miscellaneous stuff.
It's funny, the sprint midgets and stuff, which are really, really fun. I out of all of the roundy round racing, I think the sprints and the
dirt track cars
and the Whelen modifieds. The Whelen modifieds are a lot of fun. In fact, I will put up a link to this club that's working out of Attleboro area, and they go all the way through Rhode Island, southern Connecticut, out to Long Island, with a 1/24 scale Whelen Cup modified, custom built chassis, classic cars. And that car,
So in the slot car racing world, there are, are there groups that race certain types of replica cars?
Absolutely.
Or is it run what you brung?
Absolutely, different classes of
Yeah.
different and different styles of racing.
There are ovals and
There's ovals, there's road courses, there's World Rally Cup. They actually have
most fun yet. Yeah.
for 1/32 scale. They actually have a single lane rally track setup that's prevalent in Europe, but that it's been catching on in the U.S. Hand routed, a lot with scenery and a lot like a.
The only thing you're missing is from the real cars are the jumps, I bet.
Well, they're there.
Can they jump in and out of the slot? Really?
Yeah,
I'd like
what
to
they
see
do,
that.
what they do is they chamfer the slot on the other
okay.
side so that they
So
got
they have a generous groove.
a generous groove to
Yeah.
hit it in, and then
Cool.
once it
Yeah.
hits, it goes through and
Yeah.
it rolls through and.
Because that's always been the wild thing about rallying, going back even to the 50s.
Jumping.
Pictures of jumping. Jumping, as the Swedes said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they've actually, for plastic track, they've got a little rotary for the end, so you can set it up along the side of your wall on a shelf, and then get to the end, and it'll hit this little rotary, and then come back in the other lane,
Yeah.
and then hit your timer.
Yeah.
And
And one thing we haven't mentioned, if anybody has any comments or questions, or like to just chip in, whether you're talking about full-size cars or scale model cars, we'd be more than happy to entertain it.
413-267-5111 or Wales5access@gmail.com.
That's right, Wales 5. We have a website that you might want to check out, Wales5access, WIF.com,
.wix.
WIX.com. That's right, it is an X. Walesaccess.wix.com/01091.
81.
I think this is
I
the
don't
time
write-
in the evening.
I don't write well with pen.
No, I don't see well without glasses, so that works out fine. Yes, it is an 8. Now it's coming into focus. Walesaccess.wix.com//01081. Check it out.
And you should email that to me.
The webpage.
Yep, and I'll
That's
put
up.
it up on the Carmudgeon site.
Yeah.
That's up and running as of today. I worked on it last night. I'm gonna start putting every week's episodes up there, and different pictures and whatnot. So,
Good.
but I got that up and running.
Hopefully you used your own computer and not George's.
This one. I use the one here.
Yeah.
Well, let's-
If I was using dial-up, I wouldn't be done till next month.
That's right. Okay, good. We have that. So let us know. It's the new year. As we were
Now,
just saying, there's a lot going on out in the car world. Detroit
Technology.
International Motor Show starts next week, or this Sunday actually.
I have always prided myself in keeping up with technology. And yesterday, I got totally amazed at what I saw in NASCAR. They have this setup that they've got on the test cars where they put a laser on each of the 4 corners of the car, and as they're driving around the track at 200 miles an hour, they can get a reading on the caster, camber, and toe of all 4 wheels, and also the ride height and the deflection, and actually log every single bump on the track in real time.
So they have all this wonderful, amazing modern monitoring technology to help them make fine adjustments on those primitive spec racers.
Actually, the cars have changed this year.
Yeah, that's what I understand.
um,
But there's still tube frame spec racers with pushrod V8 engines in it.
Yeah, no, well,
Yeah.
I'd have to look and see what the Toyota's got in it. The Toyota may be an overhead cam rubber band V8, I'm not sure.
Interestingly, though, the new Corvette, which is actually going to debut this Sunday evening. In fact, if anybody's interested in it, at 7 o'clock Sunday evening on autoweek.com, they're going to have a link that's going to have streaming video.
Oh, no kidding.
Of the Corvette intro on the eve of the Detroit Motor Show, and it'd be something to do during the fourth quarter of the Patriots game. Hopefully the Patriots will be up by 2 or 3 touchdowns, and you can take your computer and watch the game over the top of the computer while you're watching the introduction of the Corvette. Just a thought.
Or do it.
Multitasking.
Do what I do, and I got one of these old. Well, it's actually not all that old, but I bought it just before the flat screen TVs came out. It's one of these little kitchen size old CRT TVs, and that's up on the hutch in the laundry room where my computer is. So you could turn the TV, have the TV on, and be at the computer.
Whichever one is your primary screen isn't important, as long as you're seeing both those events simultaneously.
Yep.
But what brought me into that is that the Corvette's going to have an all-new V8 motor that's going to be a pushrod motor, and one of the reasons they're using that is that it's pretty compact in terms of space. It doesn't take up as much space as a twin-cam engine, and they've got they've got it refined to the point where it's adequately powerful. To put it lightly.
That was one of the things that as you know, we just purchased a Jeep Liberty, and I'm in the process of getting the hand controls worked out because of my legs and whatnot. The way they go in, it's tough to get me fit in behind the wheel, and to the point where I can reach all the controls. And we're still working with the logistics on that. But one of the things that blew my mind is when I looked underneath the hood of that, the V6 that's in that car has got gobs and gobs and gobs of room around it. I could easily change the plugs on it myself in my present condition.
Now, is that a twin cam V6?
No, it's just a regular pushrod engine.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And none of this plastic shrouding on it.
Right.
Look underneath the hood, and
you can actually see an engine. You
can actually see an engine, valve covers, all of that, and I like the car. It's a lot of fun to drive, and it's pretty easy for me to get in and out of.
Good.
And, which is a big thing for me nowadays, and hopefully I'll be back on the road in not too long.
Yeah, be warned, Trent will be back on the road.
We can do that anytime now. I'm actually contemplating putting the hand controls back in the van as well.
But what else? We were talking, we've been kind of skipping around, but we started out kind of talking about racing with the slot cars and the other things that are going on. I've got a couple items here that came up, and I'm sure you have more than a couple. One of the things that did pop up was the amount of the number of NASCAR drivers that are getting the season going early by running in the Rolex 24 at Daytona.
Yeah, Marcus Ambrose is...
Marcus Ambrose, yeah, this is the 26th and 27th of January, so racing starts this month.
Yep, 3 weeks away.
Yep.
Rolex 24, and it starts at 3:30 Eastern Standard Time, and we'll be obviously on the Speed Channel. And a month afterwards, on the 24th, is the Daytona 500 at, the heck does that say, 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern.
That sounds right, yep.
Eastern Standard Time, and that means that by the time they get done with all of the celebration and all of that, the actual race will probably get on the way at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
No, I think they do. I think they start that fairly early because, well, of course they have lights at Daytona now, but
yeah, they got hoopla and all of that.
But
that goes on.
But yeah, Marcus Ambrose, who's an Australian who obviously had road racing in his background, is going to be running. There's a bunch of other folks. Yep,
he'll be racing with AJ Allmendinger, who is also a NASCAR driver. Yeah. And Justin Wilson, John Pugh, and Oz Negri. Oz Negri is a very, very, very good road racer. And they tested with the team last week at Daytona while Negri is recovering from an off-season injury. And they didn't specify what that was. I wonder if it was skiing related or if he fell down the stairs or something.
Well, those guys have pretty vigorous lifestyles. They bicycle, and he might have hurt himself in the weight room too. And those guys are athletes. They're real athletes.
Well, team owner Shank said Ambrose gelled quickly with the team, was fast in the car and will be a tremendous supplement to the lineup of the biggest race of the year for the organization. The lineup of NASCAR driver Allmendinger, IndyCar driver Wilson, and regular Grand Am drivers Pugh and Negri scored the win last season for Shank. And the one thing that they didn't mention in the article I had is what in the name of God are they driving?
The number 60 Ford Riley.
Okay,
So it's
Riley
going to
chassis,
be one of
Ford
the Daytona prototypes.
Yep.
The Riley chassis, Ford Power. NASCAR drivers Jamie McMurray and Juan Pablo Montoya are going to co-drive BMW Riley for Chip Ganassi.
Yeah.
And McMurray will team with Franchitti, Dario Franchitti, Scott Dixon, and Joey Hand, and along with Montoya. I'm sorry, they're driving two different cars. That's why it said BMW Riley's. McMurray's going to drive with Franchitti, Dixon, and Hand, and Montoya will drive with Scott Pruitt, Mimo Rojas, and Charlie Kimball. So
Mimo Rojas is a pretty darn good driver too.
So so those would be cars to watch, and those are all driving in the Daytona prototype class, the high-speed sport coupes. IndyCar drivers Ryan Hunter-Ray, Tony Kanaan, Rubens Barrichello, Sebastian Bourdais, James Hinchcliffe, and Simon Pagenaud.
They're all F1 drivers for the most part.
Well, yeah, several of them are ex-F1 drivers, and others they're talking about will probably be along Paul Tracy, Nelson Piquet Jr., Colin Braun, Scott Sharp, Max Pappas.
IndyCar drivers.
IndyCar and international drivers. So.
And
the 24-hour it's a good kickoff to the season, and it's going to be an interesting season because in sports racing, because this will be the last season where the American Le Mans Series and the Daytona Prototype Series, the Grand Am Series, are going to be separate, and then they're going to be joined next year, which I think is a great idea. Finally, putting big-time road racing together in one place in the U.S. The only downside is that NASCAR has the controlling interest in it, and it'll probably be heavy on Daytona prototypes, and there'll be the more exotic American Le Mans type cars will be decommissioned.
They're going to be ready to compete with the Le Mans series in France and the ACO kind of. They're going to be a parallel series.
It's going to be parallel, but they're going to be different rules. In fact, the early rules. The LMP1 class, which was a very light class last year, 5-6 cars per race, but spectacularly fast cars, those are going to be phased out, actually.
Yeah, I heard that.
And the LMP2 and the Daytona prototypes will probably be merged somehow or other.
The thing that I saw that was amazing, and I went looking for some information on whether or not I actually went looking to see if Peugeot was going to be able to make it back into Le Mans racing. Not this year, and actually the ACO is playing up the new rivalry between Toyota and Audi, and I'm working strictly off of memory. But I don't remember Toyotas having a spectacularly awesome run last year.
They were fast, but of course their race at Le Mans was notable by how many other cars they ran into, particularly the wedge car, the Nissan. I'm blanking on what they call it.
Yeah, the one that. What's his name? Put together there with the tractor.
All-American racing.
The Nissan racing tractor.
Right, exactly. But which is going to be running in a special class this year in the American Le Mans Series.
Yep. So. And it's nice to see the developmental stuff.
Yep.
I'm seriously looking at the amount of information that they were able to pull out of these test buggies at NASCAR at Daytona, and be able to get the real time. I mean, Formula One style, being able to read the engine temperature, the brake rotor temperature, the temperature of the tires while the car is being driven.
Yep.
I mean, that is just that is phenomenal stuff.
Well, all that telemetry has been out there for a long time. It's just it hasn't been used all that much in NASCAR.
Right,
think,
and that's that's the thing that I mean that could. They're saying that this year there's a whole new roll. The roll cage has been modified with two more bars in it because they made the greenhouse, which is the driver's compartment, larger, and there's actually a bar right about where the gear shift, just in front of the gear shift lever, to reinforce it in the center of the cage because the car is wider and the
Right.
in a rollover they found that the cage had a tendency to collapse right there, so they put two reinforcement bars in there.
And prevent intrusion both from on top and from the front, probably.
Yeah, and then there was a diagonal support to hold that upright as well. Interesting stuff. One of the most fascinating things that I found is that the Indianapolis Motor Speedway has been around since 1909, and we knew that, we talked about it. But Indianapolis Motor Speedway announced a settlement with the United States Justice Department on Thursday that calls for updating the sprawling century-old facility to comply with the Federal Americans with Disabilities Act.
You mean they haven't up until now, really?
You know what? Somebody in a wheelchair is going to be able to have a place to go to the bathroom in there. Among the changes,
It's not asking for too much.
right? Among the changes will be the addition of wheelchair seating in the grandstands, features making bathrooms wheelchair accessible, and adjustments to parking. The infield mounds will be wheelchair accessible, and the slopes and ramp throughout the facility will be altered for safety reasons and for wheelchair accessibility.
Good.
Speedway officials said Thursday the timetable for the changes is 2.5 years. I would imagine that there's probably going to be a place to go potty this year.
I would hope.
Yeah, I would too. Of course, if you put me in there in the wheelchair and I had to ghost, I would find a place to make it happen.
Well, let's move along. Let's not get into any more personal details.
The Speedway, like the IndyCar Series, is owned by the Holman George family, was built in 1909. And the original ADA standards were adopted in 91 and updated in 2010. Officials said the Speedway is a historic landmark, complicated some of the changes that can be made. At 253 acres with more than 250,000 seats, it is also one of the largest sports facilities in the world. It brings, because of its age, a unique set of challenges that more modern sports facilities simply do not face. U.S. Attorney George Hogsett said. Well, you know what? I'm okay with this, except for if they can make 100-year-old Fenway Park 100% wheelchair accessible, they can do it without destroying the character of the park and all of that. I mean, there are places in Fenway where you can't get with a wheelchair. You can't get down right behind home plate in a wheelchair.
Right.
You can get close.
Right.
But I mean, you can't get field side or like at Stafford Motor Speedway, you can get right down trackside in a chair. But there are some concessions to be made. The other thing is in a wheelchair, if a car were to wreck and you had to get out of the way in a hurry, you're at a serious disadvantage in the wheelchair trying to get the hell out of the way. In 1999, Dan Ward attended a practice session at IMS and said he was denied access to the pits because he was in a wheelchair. Even though he had a pit pass, he took his concerns to the U.S. Attorney's Office. An investigation found 360 different ADA violations.
Wow.
Besides the improvements, the Speedway also agreed to pay Ward and the Justice Department $35,000 each. So they got off pretty inexpensively. Kevin Forbes, Director of Engineering for Indianapolis Motor Speedway, said the changes came about weren't ideal, but he sees the situation as an opportunity. This has been a very humbling experience, he said. In spite of our efforts, our desires, and our wants to do everything right and make our facility accessible, to make it enjoyable, and to make it a great experience for our customers and all of our patrons, we sometimes fall short of our expectations, of everybody's expectations. So they're giving it a real shot at making it happen. The Speedway will submit a report to the U.S. Attorney every 90 days for 2 years detailing the compliance with the agreement, and every 6 months after that. The Speedway also agreed that all future changes will meet ADA standards. Today's announcement serves as a reminder that the march towards equality continues, and this office remains dedicated to defending the civil rights of all Indiana residents. So that's a cool thing. That makes me happy.
Yeah, that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
It's interesting. On a similar note, my daughter had a dance recital in which she both danced and choreographed, and it was at Bridgewater State University. And I was amazed at how difficult it was to get from the parking lot to
Really?
the facility.
Really?
I thought my wife was going to have a heart attack because there was a slight incline, and they were doing some work and whatnot. The curb, it was missing key curb cuts, and then when we got inside the building, you've seen the ramp on the back of my house, which is more for moving inventory from my wife's business in and out, but it also serves to function as a wheelchair ramp should it need to be. And it only goes up a foot, but it lacks the necessary length so that we can get the snowplow in and out of there in the back. But the amount of the degree of angle on the ramp going into this place was greater than the one on the back of my house, which is
plenty steep. Yeah.
Plenty steep.
Yeah.
Getting to the men's room, of course, now we had driven 2 hours from Wales to Bridgewater, and of course, by the time I got there, the first thing I got to do is find the men's room, and finding there's a staircase with 8 stairs going up, and finding somebody that knew how to operate the wheelchair lift and make the thing go up and go was tough, and then getting the thing coming back down, that wheelchair, this is a state-owned university now.
Yeah, and you would think that they might just possibly have some students that couldn't get around all that easily.
That thing got stuck halfway down.
Oh my.
And while they're running around like a chicken with their head cut off, I'm sticking my head down and I'm looking at the control box, and I see a loose wire underneath there, and I stick my fingers up underneath there, and I see a little spark, and I push the lever, and the thing starts going down, and I'm holding the wire, and the guy's going, "What are you doing? We need to get a maintenance man." I said, "I'm not sitting here all night. I'm going to miss the..."
You am a maintenance man.
I said, "I am your maintenance man right now." I said, "There's your problem. Haven't fixed this wire." And I got down to the bottom, got off it, and I came back out, and the maintenance guy says, "God, we've been looking for that loose wire for 2 weeks and couldn't find it." He said,
"We weren't looking too hard, were they?"
Well, I happened to see something flash out of the corner of my eye, and then stuck my fingers in there and managed to get the thing to arc, because it was kind of, I imagine when they did it, it was in the daytime and the sun was coming in and all of that, and you couldn't see the arc. Yeah. And now it's the evening, and I was able to pick up on it and went to it and all of that. He says, "Do you live close by?" He says, "We could use a disabled guy in the maintenance department." I said, "Nah, I get it."
Too bad.
Is that time?
No.
Shoes?
You wanna give it a shot?
Nah.
No?
Nah. He's making a passing comment on my American-made LL Bean winter boots.
Oh yeah, yeah, they're nice. I was complimenting you earlier on them. The duck boot loafers.
Second pair of shoes I was able to buy in a month that were made in the United States, and they're just boot loafers, and they're actually light enough so that I can actually pick up my feet with them on. I've got a pair of heavy Marks pack boots that are brand new sitting in the closet, because when I put them on my feet, I'm stuck. I can't pick my feet up, I can't move, I'm stuck. You gotta pick me up to move me with those on.
Well, if you try picking a fight with you, you gotta make sure you know what shoes you're wearing. Just check and see what shoes you're wearing.
I'm stuck. I'm literally glued right there to the floor. Can't move forward, can't move backwards, unless you knock me down. I'm there.
Once again, we want to welcome you to Shake, Rattle, and Roll, the custom foot apparel edition of our program.
Back to the cars.
I mean, that's one way to get around, but aren't cars another?
Yeah. Bitch, moan, and complain is the name.
Okay.
So it's the name of the show now, guys. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, and I'm glad to see that the racing is coming back. With what's been going on in the NHL, there really hasn't been a whole lot to watch. I mean, Patriots have been, the Patriots will be on once a week for as long as they can be, but I mean, who knows how long that's going to last.
That doesn't take up a lot of time.
No, and really.
One of the things I stumbled across, and this is now my amends for bad-mouthing the Speed Channel a little bit earlier, but if you search through some of their late-night offerings, they do have, and if you're into road racing particularly, they have some interesting stuff.
The German touring car series.
The German touring car
DTM.
series, the European GT series. There was a great race from Czechoslovakia I was watching some of the other night. And if you have a DVR and you go through the channel and start looking at 11 p.m. and after sometimes, you can find some interesting stuff to record to watch in an hour when you might actually be awake.
Yep. If you pay real close attention, they've had a lot of WRC and rally type racing.
Rally racing, the Australian V8 series. They've had a few of those on, which is what NASCAR racing ought to be, in my humble opinion.
Those guys are flipping nuts.
Yeah, they're crazy.
They're crazy, but they've got one track down there that the area is so flat. It's a 1.5 mile track, a road course, but you can stand in one place in there and see the whole entire track. If you had a pair of binoculars, you could look anywhere in that track and see anything that's going on. If somebody were to wipe out or slide off the track, and you had binoculars, you could actually pick out who it was. But I mean, you'd see the cloud of dust go up, or a cloud of smoke, or whatever.
And then conversely, they have the one that runs up over that mountain, which I'm struggling to remember the name of. That was just a fantastic race last year. That's probably going to be coming out in the next month or so sometime. But a big long track winding up this hill and down the hill. But high powered, relatively light, relatively small cars, all jammed onto relatively tight tracks, turning left and right and going up and down hills. Doesn't get better than that.
Did you see the a few of those Australian V8 supercars have got 2 seats in the front, and they took Darrell Waltrip for a ride late in the season last year.
Over that same track that I just mentioned.
Yep, with the downhill corkscrew and all of that, and. I don't know whether he was acting or putting on a front or whatever, but he sounded.
I don't think he's that good an actor.
I don't think so either. He sounded like the clinch factor was very high.
He was in the semi-panic mode for a while.
Yeah.
As he was screaming, "Oh!" That's hard to improvise.
What, downhill through the through an S curve at 120 miles an hour?
It's spectacular racing. And of course, being a passenger in a race car is far, far worse than being a driver.
Yeah, well,
you have to have a particular kind of self-control or insanity. These guys that ride shotgun, read the directions for the rally drivers, I don't understand, A, how they keep their lunch down, B, how they keep anything down, and C, how they can see their notes with the car bouncing around and jumping up and down, and how they keep track of where they are on the road. It's really an amazing feat of concentration under really adverse circumstances.
I thought Waltrip was going to have a heart attack when the guy who was driving the car, and it escapes me who the driver was that was taking him through.
Yeah.
He says, "Hey mate, wait till the tires warm up and get some speed going."
Yeah, right.
Oh my God! I thought they were gonna pull out the rescue truck and have to give him CPR. But disappointing news. Danica Patrick has been doing very, very well in NASCAR, but again, we've covered this a couple of times. I mean, she's doing
okay
for a rookie driver. Danica Patrick is definitely not going to run in this year's Indy 500. And she wants to. Danica Patrick's talking about the challenges that lay ahead. Clint Boyer and Jeff Gordon aren't saying whether they have patched their differences, and Brad Keselowski is eager to defend his Sprint Club title. And but Patrick said Thursday that she does not plan to race in this year's Indy 500 because she wants to concentrate on her first full-time season on NASCAR's highest level of
So
competition.
she's going to be running all the Cup Series races this year.
All of them, you know.
Good. Good.
And Boyer brushed aside questions about whether he and Gordon have made up in the months that have passed since a fight between the two drivers. Cruz broke out after Gordon intentionally wrecked Boyer the week before last.
That's the World Wrestling Federation gene that they have in NASCAR.
Hey.
You know, who could fight? Grow up, boys. Come on. You know. I mean, I understand the competitiveness when they're racing 25, 30 races a year and almost every week and seeing the same faces, and some people do some things that are maybe a little dumb more than once or twice, but, you know, grow up. It ain't hockey.
Yeah, it ain't hockey, and you know the thing about it is the sports car drivers are more refined when it comes to intentionally wrecking people's equipment. NASCAR, all holes are off. I mean, when you've got 15 or 20 cars in your barn, and somebody ticks you off, you know what I mean? It's not that big a deal to just we'll do the bump and run and hit them with the chrome horn and send them into the wall and let them, you know, rough them up a little bit. But what do you think about that? I mean, intentionally with road racing, you don't necessarily you rarely
there's
see
a different credo. I mean, there's not the idea is to avoid body contact because no good can come of it generally.
Yeah,
Whether you're the hammer or the nail in road racing, it's hard to be in a position where you're going to gain huge advantage by body contact, and the cars are such that a lot of them can be damaged more easily than the tanks that they run in NASCAR.
Yep. NASCAR basically are 200-mile-an-hour bumper cars.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can you can pound the living life out of them, and you know, take 2 or 3 good hard hits before you can't run it anymore.
Right.
Danica Patrick also said that she may run some of the Nationwide Series races on a limited basis this year, should she find a ride.
I'm sure she wouldn't have trouble if she wanted to ride.
Yeah, and it also got into the fact that she got divorced from her husband, and you know, who cares?
That happens.
How many of the drivers of the pit crews or any of that stuff got divorced in the last year that we heard nothing about?
Yeah.
So I mean, big deal, you know.
So what else you got for competition stuff? I think that probably
that pretty much wraps it up.
Pretty much wraps it up. But I mentioned the Detroit Auto Show again. That's starting next week on the 14th, and it runs for 2 weeks. The North American International Auto Show actually is its right title.
Yeah.
It has become probably the most important show in North America for sure.
Yep.
And among the 4 or 5 most important shows, along with Geneva and Frankfurt and Paris and now Beijing and Tokyo, that are in the world. And it's a place where a lot of the international manufacturers show off their stuff, and there's going to be some new cars there. The new Lexus IS is going to be at the show this year. But one item I ran across that's interesting is that Chevy, which of course is an international manufacturer too,
yeah,
is going to be bringing some cars from other markets around the world and displaying it at the North American Auto Show, just to presumably get some feedback and get them used to seeing what
the future is going to bring.
The future is going to be like. And there's 5 different ones, along with, of course, the new Corvette, which we mentioned earlier. And if you weren't here earlier, 7 p.m. Sunday evening on Autoweek.com, there will be a streaming video showing the introduction of the new Corvette. So if you're a Corvette fan, the new C7 will be introduced this Sunday. They're going to be showing 5 other models: the Trax, the Orlando, the Sail, the Spin, and the Onyx. I'm not sure about those names, but I'm not sure I'd relate almost any of them to cars, but
This is Chevrolet?
they're Chevrolets. The Trax is a small SUV that's built for Mexico and Canada. Interestingly, it's a North American car, but we don't get it.
I wonder if it's like a Geo Tracker kind of.
It's
size.
probably it's design. I'm not familiar with it. It's supposed to deliver good fuel economy, but with the space of an SUV. Basically, a shrunken version of the Traverse crossover.
Okay.
The Orlando is a part MPV, multi-purpose vehicle, part crossover, according to Chevy. Can transport 7 passengers, and the company says it's expected to deliver the best fuel economy of any non-hybrid 7-passenger vehicle for that little segment.
I found something that was interesting, and I don't know if you've noticed it or not, but when we were car shopping this year, out of the big 3 manufacturers in the U.S., and I'm not including Toyota in that, I'm going with Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler.
The U.S. named manufacturers, yeah.
I found that Ford was middle of the road, General Motors was probably the pricier of the 3, and Chrysler was definitely had some of the least expensive offerings, and the bang for the buck department.
Good value.
Yeah.
Good value. One of the cars going to be introduced is a new variant on the Dart called the GT, which has a 6 speeds of transmission and beefed up suspension, 18-inch wheels, and so forth. Just kind of a sportier version of the existing Dart, which has gotten off to a slow start, but I haven't really seen too much in the way of dynamic advertising on that vehicle either. It's
Not yet.
It's kind of what we used to call in the business a stealth launch, where you kind of put a car out onto the market and don't really make a big hoopla about it.
They did that with the Fiat 500 too, and I think what's going on with that.
Well, I think with the Fiat they had a separate reason in that they didn't have their dealers all in place at the time they launched that.
You know, the scuttlebutt that I've been hearing from my friends that are still employed by Chrysler is that Chrysler is being very, very careful to make sure that when they bring the car to market, that it's not going to fall on its face and hurt the mark as far as reputation and reliability is concerned.
That's a smart, especially given their reputation as being probably the least reliable of all of the U.S. big 3.
Well, you know,
in terms of build quality and fit and finish and so forth, not just generally overall long-term durability.
Chrysler took a pretty big hit in that department around about 95, 96 when Daimler got involved. And Daimler, one of the first things that they did was Chrysler had warehouses and warehouses and warehouses full of spare parts. And they took pride in the fact that if your Chrysler vehicle was down, that your VOR time was less than 48 hours in most cases for any type of repair. I mean, engine, transmission, differential, large repairs. They were aiming at making sure that that didn't happen. The other thing that Chrysler was trying to do was make it so that the common replacement parts like oil filters and spark plugs and that kind of thing were priced retail price to the customer similar to what you would see for prices at Walmart for the same item. And Daimler took all of that stuff away and put their great German electronics behind the dashboard. And almost every vehicle that Daimler produced for Chrysler had dashboards that dropped out.
You mean dropped information? The
well, they just
out.
Well, electrically they dropped out.
Right,
I mean,
right,
every single gauge on the dashboard, you hit a bumper, it'd go off, and nothing would work. No speedometer, no tachometer, idiot lights on, the whole bit. And my wife's Wrangler was like that. Mariah's Jeep does it.
Well, now that we got good solid Italian electronics in there, it won't be a problem.
No, now all you get is smoke.
According to George, all Chrysler is good for is rust.
That's an excellent use for Chryslers.
Every time I bring up the fact of buying a Dodge, the first thing he says to me is rust.
no cars really rust much these days. Virtually every car that's out there on the road is going to be at a minimum a decade before any appreciable rust shows up on
It's
it.
all plastic.
Well, there's a lot of plastic, but
no.
the metal is treated. That's finally been figured out how to treat metal, and most manufacturers have pretty aggressive rust warranties. But also, I look at used cars, old cars, 2 or 3 times a week, and hundreds of them pass before my eyes when I'm at the auctions.
Yep.
And you don't
Rust
see
is
a lot of rust buckets.
Not
I mean,
like
there are a
that.
few cars, the old style Tauruses, the 2002s, 2003s. There's always going to be some rust around the wheel wells on those,
Yeah.
or not always, but it's real frequent. There's a couple spots, but in terms of structural rust, where important parts are attached to the vehicle,
Not so much anymore.
not so much. You just really don't see it at all.
It's and that actually, Chrysler started getting a handle on that. Believe it or not, you're gonna laugh at me when I say this, but the car that Chrysler started getting a handle on that with, believe it or not, were the later versions of the Plymouth Reliant and the Dodge Aries, and into the Acclaim and whatnot,
Mhm.
is where they started getting the metallurgy
Mhm.
to where it needed to be.
Yeah.
The rest of the car wasn't so good.
Not so hot. No.
But they, as far as being able to, I mean, my red Jeep has got, it's a 96, it's what, 17 years old this year, and it's got 250,000 miles on it. It's got a ton of body panels that have been replaced on it, but the truck's been totaled 4 times. And Jeep keeps putting it back together. I mean, I literally totaled. I mean, at the corner of Munson Road and Route 19, I had a kid come up over the hill by the Haley's house and slam into the side of the Jeep one time at near 100 miles an hour. Hit me so hard that I actually rode the rear wheel up over the hood of the car, and the wheelchair lift on the back tore the fender off. And the kid took off, went down to Lakeshore Road. I'm not sure whether he dumped his booze or his dope or both, and then came back. By the time the state cops got there, they got him for leaving the scene of an accident.
Yep.
Unregistered, uninsured, and they impounded the car, and he took off. And as far as what my insurance agent told me, they've never found him since. I mean, he just disappeared.
Hmm.
It had Vermont plates on it.
Anyway, just running down those Chevys, we got about halfway through that list,
Go for it.
and then we got off on Chrysler somehow or other,
Imagine that.
and then you got run into, and the
Yeah.
kid disappeared, and what can we say?
Yeah.
Talking with Trent, you start talking about Chrysler? No, never.
Anyway, the Orlando, it's produced by GM in South Korea and was actually launched in Canada in 2011. I haven't been up to Canada in the last few years, but it sounds like there's some at least different cars running around
Yeah.
out there. They have a different market. The Sail sedan was designed for younger Chinese families by Shanghai GM and Pan Asia Technical Automotive Center. It's sold in China, Chile, Peru, and Bolivia. It's also manufactured in kits for assembly in India, Colombia, and Ecuador. It makes power using a 1.2 or 1.4 liter S-Tech 2 engine, so it's a
1.2 or 1. What?
1.4 and 1.2
So
engines.
1200 cc's or
And 14,
1400
yeah.
cc's.
It's a little encounter box.
So wait a minute, let me figure this out now. 60.
About 80 cubic inches or 90 cubic, close to.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if I was gonna go around
Yeah.
about 69 cubic inch
Yeah.
blow. That thing ought to have a speed of a.
Well, the new,
That's just pathetic.
the
I don't know.
start looking at the smaller displacement engines. The new Ford, the Fiesta's coming out, and I think it's going to be in the Focus, offered in the Focus, a 3-cylinder, 1-liter Ecotec turbo. Or, no, they don't call it Ecotec, that's the Chevy
Yeah.
name.
I forget what they call it.
EcoBoost.
EcoBoost.
EcoBoost turbo.
Yeah.
And,
And
I've read some reviews of it, and they say it's a zooming little car. I mean, it's
the other side of that
Not-
coin is I cringed when I first heard that Ford was getting into turbos, and all of that. And then I you know, I started thinking about it. I was actually, I can remember because I had a cup of coffee and I was sitting in the living room and I'm watching something on TV, and a Ford commercial came on for the new turbocharged cars and all of that.
And trucks.
And I cut my teeth, you know, as an automobile mechanic in 1978 at a Ford dealer. And then I said to myself, I said, well, wait a minute. In 1978, we were selling turbocharged Fords.
Turbo diesels.
No,
No?
2300 cc turbocharged Mustangs, and
Oh, okay, yeah.
not very common.
No.
It's very funny that in 1978 you could get a Mustang with a 302 in it, and
That was rare.
But that was that Mustang 2 thing, right?
right, Mustang
Yeah.
2 with a 4-speed in it, and
Right,
I got a
right.
chance to drive all of them.
Frightening
You know,
car.
there was only one car that they had that you could go out and you could break the tires loose, shifting into all 4 gears, because all you could get in that at that time was a 4-speed. But there was only one car that Ford made that you could break the tires loose, shift in from first to second to third to fourth, and chirp the tires. And if I tell you what it was, you won't believe it. So want to venture a guess?
The Scorpio, Mercury Scorpio, which was a German Ford.
Ah, you're close with the German Ford part, but it was
Yeah.
a Ford Fiesta
Ford Fiesta,
with the
okay.
1.6 Cortina engine.
Ah, torquey engine.
Yep, and it
But I have to believe a lot of that chirping had to do with some really lousy tires.
actually, you know what? It did have it did have 12-inch tires
Yeah.
on it, and the other thing is it had a really tight gearbox,
Yeah.
close ratio gearbox.
Yeah.
But man, that thing was the most fun to drive out of anything Ford had. In fact, Robin and I went to England shortly after that, and we got married in '81, so we were in England in probably '82 or '83, something like that. And we rented a Fiesta and took it all through the southern part of England, and I had a hell of a lot of fun with that. The only trouble I had with that car is we were coming on one of these narrow roads through a village, and it said at the beginning of the road, no trucks or lorries, no lorries or buses on this road. And I get into the center of this town, I'm wailing, because this road is twisting all over the place, and there's no cars on it. It's perfect, no cars, no cops, I'm on it, you know. And keep in mind, you're driving on the right-hand side, and the shifter's over here.
I would hope you are, yeah,
And
if you were in England.
I come around a corner, and this feudal village has got stone walls around all of the little cottages and
Sure.
whatnot. And here's this tourist bus in the middle of the road, and I'm in a little skinny Fiesta, but then I realize that this guy's in a third of my lane, so here's this poor fellow walking a dog along the side of the. There's no way I could stop. I go to downshift, and I instinctively grab with my right hand, and the window comes down about a half an inch, and I'm like, ruh-roh.
Reprogram.
Here's this fellow walking a dog, and I just laid on the horn, and he looked up and he saw me, and he dove into the gate and pulled the dog with him, and I went up, put 2 wheels on the sidewalk and avoided the bus and just kept right on going. And then Robin said, "You ought to slow down." I said, "I
Yeah,
will."
good program.
Yeah. Well, you're not familiar with
Back to these World Chevys.
World Chevys again.
We got through 3 of them. The Spin is an ultra-compact minivan manufactured in Bekasi, Indonesia, and it will go on sale in Thailand and Indonesia in 2013. It seats 7 passengers, an ultra-compact 7-passenger minivan to carry third world families around in. The Onyx hatchback is tailored for Brazil, according to Chevy. It offers a 5-speed manual or 6-speed automatic. Choice of a 1-liter or a 1.4-liter engine, can run on 100% ethanol or a flex fuel mixture, which in Brazil is very big because they make a tremendous amount of ethanol from sugarcane and beets
Yep,
and so forth
and-
down
yeah,
there, which
and-
is a lot more efficient than from corn.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so yeah, they
Let's-
use
now-
a lot of ethanol in Brazil.
Sugar, you know, if you look at what you can make with sugar and the rum and the alcohol-based
Yep.
products, I mean, you,
So these 5 cars are going to join the 2014 Silverado and the new Corvette, as along with 36 other vehicles. But those are going to be the new vehicles for I was going to say GM, but just Chevrolet at least at the Detroit Auto Show.
and project that started development in 2010 with Ford, and is going on until September of this year. By the end of this year, we're going to be seeing carbon fiber hoods on Fords. And one of the places that showed its cute little head was in NASCAR. And the first thought that came to mind for me was the way that's going to change the way that the guys in NASCAR drive, because no longer are you going to be able to smack up the car
Right.
and
Have the hood all kinked. The hood will be shattered.
will be shattered.
Basically,
And
yeah.
but the other thing is it's going to take a long time to get those tire ruining little shards of carbon fiber
right.
off the track.
Oh, it'll be debris on the track all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's not a.
They're gonna have to have fleets of street sweepers out there.
I was watching Formula One. I'm going to guess it was probably 10 or 15 years ago now, maybe even a little bit longer. And one of the Mercedes cars was, I want to say it was on the Spanish track, but I'm not 100% sure. But the lower control arm was carbon fiber.
Right.
And I don't know whether they had damaged it in an installation or a problem that went along with that, but that carbon fiber lower control arm came unglued at speed,
Yeah.
and it left carbon fiber shards everywhere. I was like, oh my God. I think that probably you might be better off with titanium, magnesium, or some
Well,
other
so much
such
of those
al-
cars
yeah.
are for carbon fiber. It's any accident's going to spew a lot of it.
Yeah, but I
around.
mean, I'm thinking in a high stress area like a suspension
Yeah,
component or
yeah,
something like
yeah.
that maybe you'd be a little bit better off with a magnesium or a titanium or something that's going to hang in there.
A couple other things. People may have heard about this, but the government, Congress has authorized or actually mandated that electric vehicles have to make some sound to warn pedestrians.
Yeah, we
because-
were talking about that the last
Yeah.
time we were on this.
So NHTSA is going to be implementing some rules for electric vehicles for below 18 miles an hour,
Keep snow
That-
tires on them.
that they have to have some sort of a sound. And some of the manufacturers, Toyota already has kind of like a whirring noise that broadcasts externally.
You know what?
Because electric cars compound quiet electric cars on city streets with people who are walking along texting, and you have the makings of a pedestrian impact situation.
Yep. Thing that comes to mind is the old trick we used to do when we were kids with the clothespin, the baseball card.
Yeah.
On the spokes.
On the spokes.
And that's a very real danger, because one of the things that I became cognizant about when I was a kid and rode my bicycle quite a bit is that a lot of times pedestrians, especially in Boston and whatnot, would step out in front of you on your bicycle because they wouldn't hear you coming.
Yep.
And of course, in Boston, you can get away with yelling obscenities at them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A couple other things, kind of heavy on General Motors tonight, but one of the things that's going to happen is that in the near future, the Chevrolet Camaro is going to be made in the U.S.
100%?
because it's been assembled in Canada, and to this up until now, and including now. So
Better Canada than overseas.
yeah, well, they're moving. Of course, Canada, you can hit a golf ball into Canada from Detroit, so it's not all that far. But they're going to move it to the Grand River plant. Production shift's going to happen in 2015 for the 2015 or 16 model year. So that's one little item. The other thing is, a month or two ago, I think we talked about some of the tests that the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety was taking, the offset collision tests.
Yeah, that
at
was
higher than legal speeds, and they did it
Volvo
with,
was the only one who really.
yeah, they did it with a bunch of kind of luxury cars, none of which, except for Volvo and the Acura, I think, did particularly well on it.
The Acura wasn't even as
yeah.
close. Was
Right.
was better than
But-
most, but not as good as the Volvo.
But since then, they've done it with more mainstream models, family cars. A lot of which have outperformed all those luxury cars,
Yep.
the Lexuses and so on and so forth. 13 models have qualified for the top safety pick so far, which means they earn a good rating in at least 4 out of 5 evaluations. The Dodge Avenger and the Chrysler 200, which are the same car.
Yep.
The Ford Fusion, the Honda Accord 2-door, the Honda Accord 4-door, of course, which are based on the...
Honda's been a
yeah.
darn good vehicle, right straight through.
The Kia Optima,
That
which is to my eyes one of the nicer looking mainline inexpensive cars, relatively inexpensive cars on the road. It's a nice vehicle.
there's a gag floating around on Facebook. Shows a picture of a Kia that had rolled down a boat ramp and is floating on the lake, and then the next picture it shows that the Kia is almost completely submerged. It says Kia, and then on the second picture it says no Kia.
Okay.
I was like,
No Kia.
okay, I could chuckle at that one.
Where
We're
was
still not putting it on our webpage.
Where was? Anyway, the Kia Optima, the Nissan Altima 4-door, the Subaru Legacy, and the Subaru Outback, the same vehicle.
Yep.
The Suzuki Kizashi, which is now not being sold because Suzuki is withdrawn from the country for its automotive.
That was
And,
a foreseeable outcome for them. They
Yeah.
just
And the Volkswagen Passat, the made in Tennessee Volkswagen.
Yep.
Also, the other ones that, as we mentioned, the 2 luxury models, the Acura TL and the Volvo S60, which
Yep. Both are very nice cars.
both very nice cars. And the interesting thing about it, just with my background with Volvo, is I was astonished to see that more of these higher end cars didn't have the same design features, because they made a point. Well, the Volvo and the Acura were the two most recent redesigns of the cars that they tested.
Yeah.
But the fact is that the car that the Volvo S60 replaced, the 2001 to 2008 Volvo S60, had the exact same design feature, where behind the front wheels there's a structural element that's curved that deflects impact so that the front wheel isn't propelled into the passenger compartment.
Right, and you've got a unit that the driver's compartment or the passenger compartment stays intact.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
what did they call that? Safety pod construction or safety pod?
cage.
Yeah.
Safety cage.
I heard them call it a pod
referred to
too.
it. Yeah. And
Modular pod construction
Yeah.
is what was the terminology. The other thing that I saw an article on was because of the increased use of carbon fiber and plastics and
Mhm.
whatnot, the automotive industry's been really paying a lot of attention on adhesives and designing a whole bunch of adhesives. And what surprised me is I said, oh my God, that's going to be an environmental nightmare. But no, we're not going to put it out there.
I'm not asking, I was just showing.
anyway,
But yeah, that's anytime you got any kind of adhesives or solvents or anything like that, the chances of creating an environmental nightmare are pretty intense. And I'm not. They're saying that the cars are going to be 100% recyclable and all of that, but anytime you get into the use of plastics, you're increasing your dependency on petroleum products.
Yeah, but at the same time, you're reducing the weight of the vehicle, which increases the mileage. So
Right, but
you
then
know,
you got, the thing about it is a gallon of crude oil has absolutely zero waste to it.
sure.
Every
Yeah.
single molecule of it is used, and if what they can't use for fuel or for road construction or whatever goes into the manufacturing of plastics.
Yeah.
And I mean, so one of the things that they've been developing is petroleum-free plastics. And I wonder how that'll work out if you're going to end up. I don't know if you remember, but I'm sure you do, back in the late 50s, early 60s when plastics first started coming out.
Sure.
Both of us are old enough to predate plastic. And,
More or less, yeah.
I can remember when the Bakelite was the substance, but plastic, after a year or two, had a tendency to crumble, break, and disintegrate. And, as well as melt. I mean, certain things like aftershave or perfumes that had high alcohol content and whatnot
Yeah.
can cause the deterioration. And
But again, that's something that you see changing a lot. We were talking about rust before. 20 years ago, one of the things that always seemed to happen a lot were splits on the dashboard of cars, where
Yep.
where there'd be these great cracks would open up. In fact, there's a company that makes Coverlay that makes
Yep.
replica dashboard. You just lay them on there, so they look just like the original.
Another company called Just Dash is
But it's something that you don't see anymore. You used to see that sometimes in 4, 5, 6-year-old cars. They left out in the sun. Maybe it's more prevalent if we were in Phoenix or Miami or somewhere where there's more sun. That we'd be talking about that more.
but even
it was prevalent in this part of the country 20, 25 years ago.
Yep,
and you just don't see it anymore.
The other thing that you don't see that's right along that same situation is when you had cloth seats.
Yep.
They would deteriorate and look like a pair of holy old jeans.
Yeah.
And after 6 months or a year or something, you'd start getting a split in the seats. And now, I mean,
Because most of the cloth is plastic
plastic.
these days, actually. Yeah. And some of the, and on the German cars particularly, some of the faux leather, the pleather that they have there is, I have a really hard time telling. You have to touch and feel and squeeze and rub to understand if you're sitting on leather or plastic.
Or
vinyl.
this shirt is fleece or microfiber, and
Plastic.
recycled bottles.
Yep.
Recycled bottles, honest to God. And that's the kind of thing that they're working on, and it's really amazing. I mean, I can remember. I mean, some of the changes that I've seen in my lifetime. The computer technology is just amazing. I mean, it's just and to think that the computer that's on our desktop now. My wife keeps telling me, "We got to get rid of the landline. Got to get rid of the landline. We got to get rid of the landline. We're gonna, And I said to her, I'm not getting rid of the landline until they get their act together with the batteries, and they're close."
I saw a funny little posting my cousin put up on Facebook last week that said, I don't know where he got it, but it was, try picture yourself explaining your cell phone to somebody who just came here from the 1950s. Well, I have this thing I carry around in my pocket that can access all the world's information. I mean...
To go on the reverse of that, okay, my nieces and nephews were up for Christmas. We had 14 people at Christmas time, and there were 6 or 7 of them that were under 10 years old. And I took them into my desk and I showed them my rotary dial phone, which is a working telephone and all of that. And they wouldn't believe me that it was a telephone.
No.
And they could not grasp the concept of you have to stick your finger in and spin the dial and make it work and all of that. And Robin wants me to eliminate it. She says, we can do it with cell phones and all of that. I said to her, listen,
Come on, Trent, step into the 21st century.
I've got a 2-year-old cell phone that's sitting up on my bureau upstairs that I gave up on. the thing needs a battery. They want $60 for a battery for the thing. They gave me the phone. I'm two months away from getting another free phone. Why am I going to go out and buy a battery for this thing? And why am I going to make something that you can't even get 2 years out of the battery that I never use? I signed up for my cell phone back in 1995 for, I think I get 20 free minutes a month.
Right.
And it cost me $19.95 a month.
And it was a device about this big.
Yep.
The way that the batteries in the cell phones are set up is you're supposed to charge it 4 hours, and that's it. Not overcharge. You have to, and know that battery will charge and keep that charge up until the day you get rid of it. But people don't do that.
Yet another case of user error. You broke it.
Yes,
It's
I did.
Your fault.
Yes, I did, and it was my fault. But that was you were close, but that wasn't it. Mine was fine until it went through the washer and dryer.
That's a killer. You're like, it's got to be more than the battery that's a problem with that phone then.
Actually, yeah, probably. It's probably got something in it
Yeah.
that stays on. But the other thing is when I found it in the dryer, I heard something banging in the dryer. So opened up the dryer and I pulled it out. I pulled the I didn't turn it on. I pulled the battery out and put the battery and the phone each in its own baggie with a handful of rice, uncooked rice in it, and let it sit to soak up the moisture, and change the rice after 3 or 4 days, and then after 2 weeks, charge the battery and whatnot. And it was okay for a while, but then they also have, believe it or not, they have a decal on the inside of the phone by the battery, so that the manufacturer can tell whether or not you've done that or not.
Whether or not it's counting white.
Oh yeah, they have a wet sensor in there. Definitely, definitely. And of course, who owns a cell phone that doesn't get it damp? Doesn't answer it in the rain, or doesn't have wet hands when they answer it. There's always going to be some moisture that's going to trigger that thing. So it gives them a warranty voiding
sets
device.
off when it's saturated, just because of where it's located.
Yeah. I think it's almost time to kind of wind ourselves down here.
We're getting close.
We're getting close.
What's the thing that you're looking forward to the most in the upcoming racing season?
I always look to Formula One, but I'm looking, especially over the next couple of years, to see the evolution of the American sports car racing that we were talking about earlier. The Daytona prototypes and the
American Alliance.
That's going to be fun to watch, and hopefully it'll bring back some of the excitement that we had years ago when there was just one big series that was well attended, that had lots of competition, lots of different cars in the fastest classes, and that's something that
The one that I'm looking forward to the most this year is I want to see the Camping World Truck Series race at Eldora Speedway, and see them run the crazy men in the trucks run on the dirt. That could be fun.
Or the truck-like race cars that have, yes.
Yeah. Basically the tube frame chassis pickup trucks. But thank you for tuning in.
Yeah.
We hope to see you folks next week, and have a wonderful week.
And if you have any comments or questions, email to
Wales5access@gmail.com.
Almost got you in a brain hesitation.
Well, we always have those.
Yeah.
But any complaints you have, address them to Mr. Leon Givner,
right, Lightning Rod,
our wonderful program director and executive director of Wales 5 Access, who goes way, way, way out of his way to bring you the finest of programming any small town can offer you anywhere.
Aurora! Aurora! Thanks again for joining us. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And have a wonderful Martin Luther King Day.
The 21st.